So it's time to get started. Hello and good morning and welcome to a live stream for DGST 101. That's Intro to Digital Studies at the University of Mary Washington. I'm the professor, Zach Whalen. Thanks for watching. Let me see. Let me turn down the music so that I can actually just talk. All right, great. So if you are watching, hopefully you're in the class. Hopefully if you're in the class, you're watching either live or after the fact. I've got some important stuff to cover today, so let's get right into it. I shared some notes in Canvas as always, and then I also just sent my slides that I'm going to show today in Discord. So check these out if you want. There are some links in today's slides that might be useful or helpful as you're trying to figure some things out this week. And this is week 4, so we have some stuff to do. You've got one more project essentially, but it's kind of a project with 2 parts. So I'm going to make sure to explain that today, get you ready for that, help you get started on it today. That's my goal for today anyway. But hope you're all doing well, whoever's out there. It's always good to hear who's out there. I saw Gazimir just now on Twitch. I think you're in the GMT, right? I mean, you're in the UK time zone, so I'm glad to see you can join us. And Sonia, good to see you too. It's interesting. So the Twitch dashboard I have only shows 1 viewer, but clearly there are at least 2 of you, so I'm not sure. That's usually, it's a little bit out of date. And I see a bunch of you are also online currently in Discord, so maybe you're watching on YouTube. Ultimately, it doesn't matter to me how you see it. I just want to make sure you see it so that you can learn the things that I'm trying to teach. Excuse me. So I still got this nagging cough. I can't quite shake it all the way. It's like I'm not coughing that much until I start talking like on camera, and then I start coughing and I can't help it. Okay, speaking of me being on camera, I have sent you all, most of you, I think, video feedback, like a video with feedback for your works on your work from weeks 1 and 2. If you haven't seen that yet, please take a look. I've uploaded it in most cases to your week 1 reflection assignment in Canvas or the week 2 reflection assignment in Canvas. A couple of you, I still need you to do something so I can access your work from week 2. So once you do that, I'll take a look at week 2 and do another video for you. And then we'll start working my way through week 3. And it looks like the stuff from week 3 is trickling in. That's okay. I mean, I'm glad to see it coming in. I have a couple of pointers about that I wanted to share before getting into things for week 4. And then, then we'll get on with week 4. So I sent this announcement last night with kind of a lot. So let me explain a few things. Like I said initially just now, I've recorded videos for you all for weeks 1 and 2 mostly. So take a look at those. The thing that you're working on for week 3 was the object lesson project, and it's a big one. So some of you might still be working on it. You might still have some issues. Excuse me. You might be having some issues with Timeline. So Timeline is the software that I want you to use for this project, and I want you to get it done. It isn't always straightforward. There are certain parts of it that are kind of not intuitive, but these are solvable problems, and these are things that I can help you solve. So if you do run into those issues, please get in touch and we can work through it together. I will give you some advice about it, and then hopefully you're on your own. You'll be able to figure it out on your own. But here's my advice. So I would say even if you have already gotten your stuff recorded, I think it's good to, like if you get stuck or something isn't working, it's always okay to start over again in terms of the interface that I'm going to show you here. Oh, hey, good morning. Naiva Body, just saw you on Twitch. Yeah. I saw you online in Discord, so I was assuming you were watching. Okay, so this is the Timelinejs website, so timeline.nightlab.com. This is a website, but there's actually more than just a website. It's not just information. This is actually the tool that renders your spreadsheet. So it's going to be the tool that takes the data that you put into a spreadsheet and it's going to transform it into a nice looking timeline like the one you see embedded here, the Women in Computing. So it'll be images at the top, other media at the top, text descriptions. There'll be a ribbon at the bottom with the time range in it and the different events placed on that timeline down there. This is a rendered timeline. This is your goal. You're trying to produce something similar with the information that you've discovered in your object lesson project. So to do that, the big green button, make a timeline, this is how you get started. Making a spreadsheet template, this is a good way to do it, is start with a template. So click that button, make a copy. Obviously you need to be logged into Drive to do this. And then before you even add any data, I would say go back to timeline and render this copy and then start adding your own data, checking to see if it works. So go a little bit at a time. If you add a bunch of stuff in here and then it doesn't work, it can be harder to find where the problem is because you've got a bunch of stuff. But this is the sample data and it will work. So I think it makes sense to get this working, get this rendering, and then start tweaking it to be customized to your content, kind of one row at a time, basically, no more than that. So I just made that copy here, and there are a couple steps you have to do. I'll show you that step. You need to go to File and then Publish to the Web. I don't know why Google Docs have two separate sharing paradigms, but they do. They have this Share with Others paradigm, which you can access through the blue button or the green button up here. It's blue in Google Docs, I think, but it's green in Sheets. Or there's also the Share Publish to the Web. And I don't know why they've decided to do it that way. It wasn't my decision. This is something that they did, and we can't really do anything about it. So we just have to wait until they make it more intuitive. One thing they have done that's more intuitive actually is they've put both of those options in the same place now on the left, in this left menu. That's something that is relatively new. So you go to Share and then Publish to the Web. Hopefully the resolution is coming through okay so you can see that. Publishing it to the web will change the settings on it, and that's all you got to do is hit the green button, Publish to the Web. You do not need this URL. You don't actually need the public HTML copy of this spreadsheet. You don't need to download it. You just need to set the access permissions so that now Timelinejs can access it. And I've done that because I clicked that button. I don't need to do anything else. I don't need to do anything with this URL either. I just need to exit that, and then back over here in the timeline, the spreadsheet instructions here start with number 1, create the spreadsheet. I just did that. Publish to the web. I just did that. And then now it says copy the URL in your browser's address bar. So not the one that shows up when you go to Publish to the Web, but the one that shows up in the address bar. It's going to end in /edit, or maybe something after that, but it should say /edit at the end, not /pub.html. If it does, then you can copy that. I'm just going to right click, I'll just select and then Control-C to copy that to my clipboard, and then you bring it back here. So these instructions here aren't just instructions, they're actually the tool that's going to process this. And at step 3, you paste your URL right here into that field, and you don't worry about the settings yet, and then that actually updates the URL down here so you can preview it. Preview and view, really the same thing. It's the same link, it's the same tool that processes it. They call it a preview, which kind of implies that it's temporary, but it's not. It's actually just the thing that you will share when you're done with this project. So I like to look at it in a separate window, but you can also see it down here. This is no longer their copy, what's rendering down here. This is now my copy that's rendering down here. But I like to look at it in its own window. So here it is. And then just to kind of test that this is mine, I'll just make a quick change here. I'm not going to go all the way through the edits and things. I did that in the video for Friday, all the different options and the different types of media you can embed. So take a look at that. I'm just reviewing this creation process because this is pretty important. Okay, so I've now got this. Now it says my spreadsheet example instead of the Google spreadsheet example. So let me just refresh this. And sometimes it doesn't update instantly. So sometimes up to a minute or two. And this is something that I'm just going to keep refreshing until it works. And there it goes. So now it says my spreadsheet example. So if you didn't see that after a couple minutes, that might mean that you didn't give it the URL or something. But usually if you give it the wrong URL, or if you forgot to publish to the web or something else, you're going to get an error message. And I'm gonna trigger an error message here just to show you a common thing that can happen, and then show you what to do about it. All right, so let's say I entered the date November. I entered the month with the word November instead of the number 11. That's going to cause a problem here. Let me show you what that looks like if I do. So it says invalid date, month, day, and year must be numbers. You're actually going to get an error message like that for every instance of an invalid date. All of the values in these first 8 columns have to be numbers. They have to be, exactly, numbers. I would say you don't need the actual time of day for anything that we're doing for this. You don't need that much precision, so I just delete that. The only field that's actually required here is column A. You have to have a year in that field. Everything else is optional anyway. And if you don't know exactly, then it's okay to delete that and just leave it blank. But what's not okay is having it a year, like a name, like the word November. So you can see that that's telling me that's there. In fact, the spreadsheet comes up with this little tooltip here. I don't think it is popping up. It says invalid. It's got a little red flag on it saying this is wrong. You need to do something different. And yeah, I just need to change that to a number, back to the 11, and then I'll go back here. So when you get this error message, if you do, this is actually good, because this means that the Timelinejs software tried to render the spreadsheet, so that means it has access to it. It just means that there's some error, there's something wrong with the data, and then that just means that your focus then is not figuring out how to share the document anymore. Now your focus is, okay, where's the error? Like, where is something not a number? And that should be something you can view, and then correct, and then after a minute or two refresh, and it should clear that up. Okay, so that's kind of a review. I did cover this already on Friday, but I think it's helpful to see something like that twice, and maybe I explained it differently or better this time. I don't know, but that's a review of the Timelinejs process. Make sure you do that. Also, make sure you include a link to this. I would say it's easiest just to include a link directly to this here. But one thing that I have been commenting on in your videos is whenever you're writing for the web, whenever you're writing the Google Doc articles, whenever you're writing a blog post, when I'm reading those, I should never see http://cdn.nightlab.com/lib/timeline3/latest/embed/index.html. I should never see that. No one should see that. We want people to see the content that is hosted at that URL, but we don't want to see the full URL. It's distracting, it's ugly, it's annoying. So instead, make sure you have some text in your document, in your blog post, whatever, that's a link to this content. Make sure that is a phrase. So a phrase might be, here is my timeline, and then that phrase is a clickable link to your timeline. That is how you do links on the web. That's how I want you to do that. And if you don't do that, I'm going to keep telling you about it. So please make sure you do that. Okay, so if you do have any questions, please ask. If you do get an error message, usually the error message points you to what the problem is, but if it's not clear what it's telling you, then that's the kind of thing certainly I can try to help with. The other thing you can do when you get an error message, if you don't understand what it's saying, is Google the error message. Like just copy and paste it into a search field, and you may find other people have had the same issue. You might find documentation for the tool explaining how to solve that problem. Lots of things will prop up that way, and that's a good troubleshooting strategy in general. It's like Google the error messages, right? Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about Timeline for now, unless there's any questions. I want to move on to talking about what's up for week 4. So I'll go ahead and switch into kind of presentation mode. Make sure that that's showing like I want it to. Yep, okay. So this is, it's a slideshow, like I said, and this is week 4. Week 4, we're focusing on digital methodology. So you might remember there's the 3 pillars of Digital Studies 101, creativity, culture, and methodology. Now we're looking at the 3rd. We kind of spent 2 weeks on culture, and now we're spending the final week on methodology. And I say final week, by the way, because this is our last week of content. There is another week, like next week, which is week 5, but week 5 in a summer class is essentially finals week. So there will be some things that I ask you to do, but it's not going to be new content. It's going to be reflection, revision, and wrapping up, essentially. So it's not, I might not even live stream, I don't know, but it's something that's really, the end of content is really this week. And it's this project, the Digital Methodology Project. Okay, so here's what I want to talk about today. I want to help you. I want to explain digital methodologies, what that concept means. I want to show you some modules that you can choose from this week, and I want to show you how to start learning some HTML, because that's the other part of this project. You're going to do some digitally methodological research, and you're going to share the findings of that research by coding a page using HTML, coding a web page using HTML. So those are the 2 things that we'll do. A lot of the learning and discovery that is done on your own will be the digital methodology side. A lot of the, teaching that I'm going to do is going to be on the HTML side. So but we still have to meet in the middle for both of those, and I'm happy to help as I always say. Okay, so today, like I said, I'm going to explain some things and get you started with some basics, and then tomorrow I want to actually go through the kind of research that you can do with methodologies, with these different methodologies. So I posed a question last night in Discord. I don't know if anybody's responded. I just put it in the general channel under text. One of the things you can do for a digital methodological research project is study artifacts of culture, artifacts like literature and film. And so one thing that's interesting to do with a couple of the techniques I'm going to show you is analyze and compare a film and the book that it was based on. And I have posed a question there to ask if there are any of you if you have a favorite book to movie adaptation, or one where you've seen the movie and haven't read the book but you're curious, or vice versa, you read the book, haven't seen the movie. That could be interesting to analyze with the tools I'm going to show you how to use. So it's helpful when I show those tools to have like an example that's actually relevant. So, or that at least one of you cares about. So if you have any suggestions for that, I would love to hear those. If not, I can just come up with something, but it's always good to hear suggestions. Last year I did To Kill a Mockingbird, and the year before that I did, I think, The Night of the Living Dead. So it can be something kind of cheesy like Night of the Living Dead, or it can be something kind of, topical like To Kill a Mockingbird. But whatever you're interested in would be great to hear. If not, I'll just pick something else. Right? I always like to try new things. So I'll come up with something new if you can't think of anything. Okay, cool. So let's get back into this. Okay, so digital methodology, really it's plural too, methodologies. A methodology is a way of doing things. And methodology is like a fancy, academic kind of word, but it just means a way of doing things. And since we're talking about digital technology, it's important to be clear about what kind of things we're doing and what it means to do things. And I think a clearer way to say this might be that it's answering questions and testing hypotheses. And that's the kind of thing that we're doing here when we call it a methodology. It's a way of answering a question, testing a hypothesis. That means to really get into this, you have to come up with a question, you have to come up with a hypothesis, but I'm kind of showing you the whole process here as we go through this. Okay, so this is, sorry, I forgot what step I was on here. So the word digital, this is something we've been using. Obviously, we use this word a lot, digital studies. It's a word that we might not spend that much time reflecting on, though. So let's think a bit about what digital might mean. And we can be more specific about that. And I think in this case, it helps to be more specific because, in a sense, everything is touched by digital technology today. It's hard to imagine any aspect of our life that isn't. But we can be, when we're trying to use these digital tools in a particular way, I think it's useful to clarify a particular class of digital stuff, and that means software and programming. That's the kind of thing that we're doing. So we're going to be using software and computer programming to answer questions and test hypotheses. So if we go back to digital methodology, that's sort of the shorthand thumbnail version of this idea. That's what we use what I use in the syllabus. That's what I use on the website. This is how I tend to explain this thing. But ultimately, another way of expressing that idea, and possibly more clearly, although longer, is to say that we are interested in a way or ways of answering questions and testing hypotheses using software and or computer programming. And that's what we're getting into, this week. So that's digital methodology in a nutshell. Digital methodologies in a nutshell. That's the overarching approach. There are several of these that are modules on the DGST101.net website. And this week, I'd like for you to choose from one of three. And you'll find this information on DGST101.net. I'll talk about each of these in some more detail, but this is them: cultural analytics, text analysis, or networks. And these are three different approaches. There are some relationships or similarities between these, but they're pretty different. They will involve different tools and will also answer different questions about what you're studying. Excuse me. So when you're thinking about what your question is or what your hypothesis is, it makes sense to choose the right tool that's going to actually give you that answer or get you as close as possible. So that's the basic idea of those, of where we're headed. Okay, so I'm going to talk next about each of these in turn. I'm going to show you some examples of the kind of work you can do with each of these. And, your goal for today is to actually do this reading and go ahead and pick one of these. I've created channels in Discord for each of these. So if you pick one of these, if you are ready to commit to one of these today, then state your intentions in that Discord channel. Also do a blog post explaining what you plan to do. And since this is the beginning of it, of course, you can be optimistic. You can be hypothetical. You don't have anything yet necessarily. So, go ahead and describe like what you think might be possible with this. Okay, well, let me give you some ideas of what's actually possible here. So let's talk about cultural analytics. And so this is a pretty broad area of study, a pretty broad sub-discipline. There is a journal of cultural analytics, for example, an academic journal where people publish this work, and it can include some of the other things. It can include network analysis and text analysis, but there's a broader class and a slightly different class of things that I think I'm interested in when I use this phrase, cultural analytics. That has to do with using software to look for patterns, trends, or themes across cultural content, and usually visual content. And that's something that, makes sense, I think, when you see an example of it. Hopefully it makes sense. So here's a professional example. So Kevin Ferguson is a professor. I'm blanking on where he's based, but he's another digital studies type professor like me. Actually, I think he's film studies, but he's someone who's done this work using using software to analyze visual texts. And in his case, in this article that's going to come up here, the texts he was analyzing are Disney movies. So he's taken a bunch of Disney movies and he's done something to them, and he's got some artifacts that he produced through that analysis, and then he's going to use those artifacts to make an argument. So there's a lot going on in that, the way I just summarized that. But that's the work of a professional scholar working with tools like this to advance arguments about culture. So what's happening here? This is what's called a Z projection, and it's kind of hard to explain, but maybe not. He calls this technique digital surrealism, but that's not what to focus on. The thing that technologically what's happening here is this phrase here, a summed frame Z projection. And essentially what that is if you can imagine a film, you can break that film into all the individual frames of that film, right? A picture for each, 12 times a second, 24 times a second, depending on what your format is. I think these were 14, or I don't know, but these are Disney movies. And excuse me. So what he's done with software is take one of these movies, extract an image of every single frame in that movie, and then stack those up, not left to right, but front to back, like vertically, like coming toward you. And as they stack, they combine colors. So they're kind of smushed together and blended together into one image. And that's what you see here. So this is the movie Sleeping Beauty in a single frame. Every frame of that movie compressed into a single frame. And it looks cool. I mean, it's the kind of thing that would be an interesting piece of art to hang on a wall. But Kevin Ferguson here is arguing that not only is that an interesting looking thing, but we can use this image to understand the movie better, to understand Sleeping Beauty better. We can put it in the context of other Disney movies by comparing their Z projections. And that's what he does throughout the article here. He does some other kinds of analytics with them too, but the Z projection, here's an array of all or most of the Z projections. And it's pretty interesting. You can actually see some trends. You can see some patterns that reoccur across different films, Disney movies. You can see a conventional composition structure that you start to notice, that tends to be a lot of contrast near the center of the frame. And that shows a particular cinematographic, a preference of cinematography that reoccurs throughout these images and then changes over time. People have done different, this analysis is something you can do with any other kind of large set of images, by the way. So Kevin Ferguson, I believe he's the one who also did this with covers of Time magazine and covers of Playboy magazine. These are different ways where you've got a large set of images, and it's hard to look at them all at once, like all 10,000 of them or whatever. Or in this case of these films, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of images. You can't look at all of them. But if you smush them together in an interesting way using software, maybe you can draw some conclusions that you would not have been able to until you did that smushing, until you did that processing. So I find it a really interesting and compelling thing to do. And also, if nothing else, the images just look cool. Like, look at that. I mean, that's crazy. And you can almost tell, right? So it's kind of fun too, like to take an image like this and then try to figure out which movie is it. And I mean, I happen to see the caption here, but this does look like Winnie the Pooh now, if you think about it, because there's kind of this goldenness here. It's kind of gold and reddish in the middle, which is probably the color of Pooh, and then like the red, like vest or whatever he wears. So it's something there that gives you a sense of Pooh in that as you look through it. So yeah, there he is. It's kind of like I guess it's a shirt, jacket, whatever. So it's an interesting example. Now, this is a very long essay. This is a very long academic article. I don't expect you to do something like this. But there are things that you can do with this tool and with the time you have here. Here's an example of it. This is an example by Brian Wolfe from a couple years ago. He was really interested in this technique, the Z-axis technique specifically, and he excuse me. And he did the same thing. What he did here is a slightly smaller set, but it's still an interesting set and a big enough set to be interesting. He found all of the paintings that Bob Ross painted on his TV show. So someone else compiled this database of all these images. I think it's a wiki, like a fandom wiki. And so Brian found those. He pulled the images off of that, and then he ran it through the Z projection software and tried changing different settings. This is like season by season. There are different options within it, but it is enough for Brian to have something interesting to say about it because he noticed some trends in this. One thing that I noticed when you look at it is you can see how strong of a preference Bob Ross has for compositions that have like a stream or a path kind of working its way towards the center of the frame. You can kind of see that stream or path in the bottom center of this projected image. And he likes to put sort of dark pine trees on the sides. And you can kind of see that here on the sides. It's an observation that you might have made by watching hours of Bob Ross, or you can make by looking here at this single image and have a quick impression of that. You would need to test that impression by actually watching some Bob Ross paintings come together, but you've got a way into that observation because of this Z projection view of it. Okay, so that's an example of a digital methodological approach. Let's see. Yeah, so there are some tools that you'll need if you want to do this, and I've got links here to some of these. I'll just show them to you quickly. So ffmpeg is a command line tool. If you've never worked in a command line before, that can be kind of intimidating, but it's not as bad as you think. I mean, most people, once they get into it, they realize it's not as alienating as they thought it would be. But ffmpeg is the best tool to do the first step of this process of producing a Z projection or other kinds of visualizations, which is to take a film and extract images for each frame of that film. There might be some online tools for it. I would be surprised though if there are actually any online tools. There might be some bespoke software packages you can download, but ffmpeg is really the best thing, and anything else that you can download is really probably just going to be using ffmpeg and but like creating a GUI interface for it. But ffmpeg works great. I like it a lot. It takes some steps to install and run it. I might, if I have time, I might do like a screencast, like a video for how to go through the whole process of installing it in your command line in Windows, and then another one for Mac. I'd have to reinstall it, but I don't know. There's also some stuff just about working with the basic command line that you'll need to know in order to really use ffmpeg. But it's a power horse. I mean, power horse, whatever. It's a whatever the word is. It's an extremely powerful tool, but it does take some getting used to. ffmpeg is great though. So once you have all those images, then you need to run it through some software. And the one that Brian used, the one that Kevin Ferguson used, is ImageJ. And let's see, looks like they're having an issue on the nih.gov. Just to double check, they may have changed their URL, so let me just do a quick Google here. Yeah, no, that's it. Okay, well, let's go ahead and let's go. All right, so it's not letting me access this, which is probably good that this browser isn't letting me through. Let me just take a look and let me turn off this. No, it's not going to let me go through without the security. So 1 second, let me turn off my turn this tool off. Oh, it is off. That's weird. I actually want it on. But yeah, I was trying to bypass the security setting here. All right, let me just try this in a different browser that might give me a better set of choices. And then if this works, I'll share it here. Oh, neat. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, I just found something kind of interesting that I might pull back here. They offer a browser-based version of ImageJ now. I forgot about this. I haven't used it lately, so I'll update the link in the slides. But this is a different URL, and it does seem to be working. It's going to take a minute to load it. ImageJ is another very powerful tool that is and when we say powerful, that means it can do a lot, but that also usually means that it's not going to be as user-friendly. So, you know, your mileage will vary with these things, right? But if ImageJ loads in the browser, that could be nice. Because ImageJ is much more powerful than the next tool I'm going to show you. Oh, wow, there it is. Okay. Let me just try this real quick. Let me see if I can actually run this in here. Why can't I can't seem to actually edit the path here. That's weird. Ah. Okay, so I need to play with this to see if it's really viable or not. If not, it's okay to download it, and it works okay. It's a Java-based program, and so it'll work on whatever computer you have. I just don't know. I don't have anything in that. I don't know why it pulled up that particular path, and it's not letting me edit it for some reason. Let me just see if I actually have anything in that path. I might. I do not. Okay, so I don't know why it's insisting on this path. And it won't let me browse to a different path. I don't know. I'll try again later. But if it works in the browser, it's probably fine. It's just I don't really know how well that's going to work, just based on what I know it's going to do. Well, let me show you something that I do know will work in the browser. This is ImageJ, or ImageJ, and this is a tool I made, so I know how it works. It's a little clunky in a couple spots, but I think it's a lot more. I hope it's a lot more user-friendly than ImageJ. So let's see. I don't know if I'm not going to show you how to use it right now, but because I'll do that tomorrow. But basically, it lets you do several kinds of image macro visualization. It can't handle. It doesn't have enough power to do the Z projection. It might be possible, but it does. I mean, I'm thinking about it. Could be done, but I don't know. I think it would use a lot of computation. And the issue with this, or the limitation with ImageJ, is that with Image rather, is that it's running in a web browser, but it's actually running on your computer's memory. So it's limited by how powerful your computer is. Even though it looks like it's online, it looks like you're working in a web browser and you're looking at, you're uploading things to my website. You actually aren't. It's all going to be processed on your computer. And if you ask your computer to do too much, basically, if you try to process thousands of images with this tool, it can fill up all of the available memory on your computer and freeze it up and cause the browser to crash. This is something there are ways I could build in like memory warnings and stuff, but I really just kind of put this together and it works well enough that that particular scenario is unusual enough that it's not enough of a problem for me to try to add that kind of error checking in it. But it works pretty well. You can make 3 different kinds of visualizations with this. You can make what I call a barcode, you can make a montage, or you can make a plot. And I'll show you each of these tomorrow with an actual movie that we can, so you can try it as well with me. Okay, so those are some popular tools if you're doing cultural analytics. Okay, so text analysis. So text analysis is whenever you're using software to look at patterns, trends, or themes in textual content across a series of things that are text. And I know one of you is already pretty familiar with this approach because we did this in a class last semester. We spent the whole semester doing it. But let me show you some examples of this kind of thing. A professional example of someone doing text analysis using software to answer a question about text. This is a pretty famous one. This is Patrick Drewolo was the researcher here. And as you may recall, many years ago now, it looks like, J.K. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter book series, also published some other books under a different name, but she didn't disclose that this was her. She was trying to do this in secretly, basically, with a student named Robert Galbraith. There was a rumor, or there was some for some reason, some people suspected that Robert Galbraith was J.K. Rowling, and so Patrick Drewolo, the researcher, used some software to argue to calculate the statistical probability that J.K. Rowling was the author, and it was that probability was very, very high, and so J.K. Rowling basically said, "Yes, you got me. That was me." So there was a very specific question he was trying to answer. The software gave him a pretty confident answer, and it was right in that sense. So this is a approach. That approach of trying to determine authorship by statistical means is called stylometrics. It's one of many textual approaches that you can use that you can use software for, but it's a pretty compelling one. It's a pretty interesting one. That only is really necessary though whenever you have kind of a forensic question like Patrick Drewolo had in that sense, which is who wrote this, and we don't always have that kind of question. I mean, that was something that was put to him, and he was able to answer it, but we don't always have that kind of thing. Instead, what we're trying to do is try to find interesting observations or interesting things about text that we weren't aware of before. And I have another student example. So Patrick Drewolo, right, he had that sort of high profile, super powerful set of tools to do that. And he also developed a lot of those tools. Like he's the right person to do that. But for anyone like you or me, we might have a different set of questions, a more kind of interpretive kind of question. Excuse me. Something in the sense that we would approach a text in a literature class. And so here's an example of that. This is a semantic analysis of monster books. This is Olivia Burnsley, a student from a few years ago. And she, I think, did a great job writing this up, for one thing. I mean, she wrote kind of, here's this set of things that I'm interested in. Here's my hypothesis. Like, here's what I think I'm going to find. And then She shared the findings. This is the data from a tool called Voyant Tools, which I'll show you in a second. And then she explained what she found, and then basically answered whether or not she proved her hypothesis. A very scientific kind of approach to literature, but it really works. And she cited her sources. A really nice looking basic essay here. So this is good. So this is conceptually very close to what you would do, just like the thing that Brian Wolfe did is also conceptually very close to what you're going to do. I am going to ask you to do this in a slightly different way, to share your work in a slightly different way. But as far as the content, they both have a good approach to the content of what they've done. Okay, so let me show you, I'll show you the tool that Olivia used for that in a second. The popular tool for this really the tool that I would recommend you use for this if you want to is actually a bunch of tools that are combined together into one dashboard called Voyant Tools. So let's take a look at it here. This is Voyant Tools. It is a website, voyanttools.org, and this is a tool hosted at this website. You can upload text artifacts to this. That means, by the way, if you want to study a book, you have to find a plain text copy of that book. But there are ways to do that. I can help if you can't figure it out. Gutenberg.org is the place to find a lot of things. But let me just show you how this tool works using some of the texts that are kind of preloaded in it. So let's take a look. First of all, let's do Shakespeare's plays today. And it's going to load this here. Excuse me. And this is the dashboard view in Voyant Tools. It gives you 5 windows, and each of these windows can actually be exchanged for different views. Some of them are pretty intuitive, like the word cloud I think is pretty intuitive. Every word in the data set, which is called a corpus in this case, every word in the corpus is going to be represented here, and the larger the word, the more frequently that word shows up. Right, so you can see that shall and king and good are all very large words. Come, Lord, enter. These are all very large words. That means they show up in multiple Shakespeare plays multiple times. In fact, if you hover over it, it'll tell you how many times it shows up. So king is at 3,309. Shall is 3,594 times. So quite a few times, right? And if you start reading some Shakespeare plays, you'll see these words and you'll understand that makes sense. I think there's a lot in here. I think the best way to understand what Voyant Tools is doing is to load a corpus, load some book into this that you already know a little bit about, and then start playing with all the different options. You can switch the options. I'll just show you here. It's like a little icon, and to me their iconography is not very good, but the one that looks like the Windows icon, like the Windows operating system icon, when you click on that, it will let you change whatever tool is going to appear in the top left. And some of these tools are pretty different. Let's do let's check out bubble lines, and this is showing you the locations of those words as they're showing up. I don't know how you would use this to support an argument in an essay, but it kind of looks neat, and that's not nothing. I mean, that's something. There's other things that are kind of just neat, and it's sort of like, okay, what do I do with that? This is bubbles. Maybe bubbles isn't working. It has to fetch the visualization from the server every time you change it, so maybe it's just taking a little bit of time. Scatterplot is a really complex set of tools, so you can certainly check it out. And by the way, if you end up like you're interested in one in particular but not the other 4, you can pop one of these out on its own. If you click on this icon here that looks like the up arrow, you click on this to export the URL, and then the link, like the title of this little pop-up, is actually the URL for that exact visualization. So when you click on it, it'll open it in a new tab, and now I've just got this one visualization here. Instead of it being compressed into that top left corner, now that one is taking up the full screen, and I can actually see what it's doing. You really need that for the scatter plot because it's got so many things in it. It's got a bunch of other sub-tools built into it, in fact. So I definitely recommend opening this one in its own window, but you can do that with any of the other tools too, which is especially useful if you're ready to share the results, or like to show somebody, hey, check out this scatter plot. Like you can customize it, like you can tweak the filters and stuff to represent what you're interested in, and then share that visualization with someone else. Okay, so that's Voyant Tools. The other thing that you will need, by the way, this isn't really a tool exactly, but I mentioned this already, but if you're interested in literature, you can find basically every public domain literary work on this website, Gutenberg.org. And public domain means it's been published before, what year is it now, 1925 at this point? That date changes a bit, but it's in the 1920s, usually 1923. Copyright law is complicated, but there is a point by which anything before that is going to be automatically public domain, and then things after that, it depends on whether or not it's public domain. But if it's public domain, there's a good chance it's here, and you can get a copy of it to load into Voyant Tools. And let me just show you that real quick. Let's take a look at Dracula. So here's Dracula by Bram Stoker. Plain text UTF-8 is the best version to use, and here it is. So here's this text, and you can load this into Voyant. That's the idea. I'll do that. I'll go through that tomorrow in some more detail. Okay, so that's an overview of text analysis. And then finally, networks. So networks are, it's relationships between concepts that have some kind of meaningful relationship to each other. Here's a really cool example of it. And this is, like I say, a professional example. This is the Open Syllabus project. I find this fascinating, and I learned a lot from this. I use this a lot. I use this, the most obvious way I use this is planning a class whenever I'm trying to figure out what should I put on my syllabus, because that's what this is. It's over 1 million syllabi that have been processed, and they've been, well, I'll just zoom in so you can actually see. Let me find where my discipline is. I don't know where it is. It's around here somewhere. But if you, media studies, maybe, information science. Basically, a dot here. So, hey, here's one we know, As We May Think by Vannevar Bush. A dot is a text, and the size of the dot will convey how many syllabi that text appears on. So Vannevar Bush is pretty large. Vannevar Bush's As We May Think is pretty large, which means it's a frequently assigned text. And then the proximity of one dot to another dot is a gravity function based on how many assigned texts they have in common. And so what you end up seeing are clusters that are disciplines. So you see here this is kind of the media studies cluster, and then down here there's like the information studies or information science cluster. It kind of makes sense that As We May Think is kind of halfway between media studies and information science, right? It kind of covers both. And so it's a brilliant illustration actually of how this network graph mathematically computed that relationship that we could also observe by viewing it, but it just kind of pops up. The thing that's cool then too is you can kind of see, okay, what else are people assigning in the field of media studies? Like me, as someone who's creates syllabi, I want to see what people are assigning, and I want to see if if I can find a book I've used, what other classes use that book, and what else are they assigning, and that lets me discover new things that I haven't thought of. I'm just kind of scrolling around through here. What's all this? This looks like finance stuff. Marketing. Okay, yeah, that's interesting that those kind of connect there. Oh, what's the purple stuff? Was that communication studies? Oh, computer science, of course, yeah. Artificial intelligence, Stuart Russell. Anyway, fascinating, fun to explore. Now, this is, like I said, a professional example. The people who produced this had a tremendously large database to use, and they also had some software and some approaches to crunch those numbers. You don't have to do that for this class, certainly. But here's an example that a student did produce using a tool called Kumu, and I'll show it to you here. This is the Rugby Family Tree by Cassie Bender. And what they did is there's, so I guess, I don't know really, but apparently the women's rugby team at UMW has this tradition where new players are considered like adopted children of like a mother, right? So there's like an adoptive mother who is like basically an upperclassman mentor to those newer students, newer players. And Cassie was interested in like who was mother to who, and who were like quote siblings, and how does that, did those siblings have more success as mothers later on? And she was basically trying to keep track of all this stuff as a way to help the rugby alumni track each other down and basically remember like who was who and who were your siblings and so on. And so you've got all these different relationships mapped out here. So each dot represents a person. You can zoom in on it, and then you can see how they were related to each other. Let's see. Actually, I gotta view this over here. So this looks like between Emily and Ivania here. I think Ivania was the mother, but it looks like you can see that Ivania was actually the mother to a bunch of different players. So this is a way of showing you like a zone of influence in this. So Ivania has more influence in this network than someone else like Julia Robinson, who has influence but not as much because of it. There aren't as many connections to her. So you can actually use some different things with this visualization in Kumu to make like nodes with multiple connections scale in order of like the number of connections they have, and then they would pop out a little bit more visually. But Cassie decided to keep them all the same size and just change the colors for different types of things. So this was spring 2020 when Cassie completed this. So well, I think she spent like a year on this. Like she spent a long time like tracking people down and figuring out who was who. She had a big spreadsheet initially, and then she converted that data into a format that would work with this tool, which is Kumu, and I can show you Kumu in some more detail tomorrow. There's another tool that you can use for network type analysis. I've had a hard time using this sort of recently, but it is kind of interesting in that it attempts to harvest and archive tweets. And then with that archive, it tries to, you can develop a networked visualization of those tweets, like who's retweeting who and who follows who within that network of tweets. That tool, it doesn't always work, and it's always a little, things like this are always a little fragile because this is not something that was approved by Twitter. Like this is a third-party thing that Martin Hoxie created that's accessing Twitter and trying to figure some things out about Twitter, and then put that stuff into a spreadsheet. So whenever Twitter changes the format of the API, then the tools like this have to update or they might break. And that's unfortunately what we have to do whenever we develop tools like this. I developed a tool that uses a Google spreadsheet to create a Twitter bot, but it frequently breaks because Twitter changes the way that their API works. And in fact, there is a big update I need to make to it right now, but I don't really have time. So someone else is working on it actually, which is great. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the options for digital methodology and also quite a few examples. And I hope the examples are even more helpful than the explanation. I think they are. They usually are. Okay, so let's take a look then at the other side of this project. So the first part is you're going to need to do one of these things, one of these kinds of things. The second side is that you're going to need to share what you've done using HTML. I want you to write code to produce a web page using HTML. We're doing things the old-fashioned way, the foundation of the web. Hypertext markup language, that's what HTML stands for. HTML is the language of the web. It's the language that you've seen and interacted with. It's the language that powers, Discord and Canvas and Google Slides, everything. Whenever you're looking at something in a web browser like Chrome or Firefox or Safari or Edge or Opera or Brave or whatever browser you use, you are looking at content that was coded in HTML. And it's everywhere. And I think it's good to know how it works. So that's what we're going to do for this project. I would like for you to hand code some HTML. So if you've never done HTML before, there are lots of ways you can learn this. I will explain some things on the live streams, but I think it helps a lot if you have multiple ways of learning something at the same time. There are plenty of YouTube videos, but there are two web-based curricula that I like that also will walk you through the steps of learning this. Let me just go ahead and close these tabs to the right to give me some room to work here in this browser. Between these two, I like W3 Schools better. A lot of students like Codecademy better. I think they're both fine. But I want you to take a look at both of these and decide which one of these you want to learn from and then start working your way through it. So let's take a look at W3 Schools first. The thing with W3 Schools that I like is that you can jump to any point in the tutorial that you are interested in. And that's helpful for me because I already know this stuff. So if there's something that I just need a refresher on, or I'm trying to find something, or like, okay, how do I do emoji again? Like I can just jump straight to that and I have that answer. And so that's different from Codecademy, which I'll show you in a second. But, some people, if you're not sure what terms are or whatever, like it can be a little bit daunting to try to navigate a tutorial that way. But when you start with the actual tutorial, right, study our free tutorial, it really does go step by step. So you need to read it. So you need to look at the explanations here. I recommend both reading it and whenever there's an opportunity to try something like here, click this try it yourself button and then play around with it a little bit and see what happens. You change something here on the left, you click the run button and then you see what difference it made on the right. And I really like that left and right thing where you try something and see what happens. Try something, see what happens. That's what I recommend you do whenever you see a thing like this in W3 Schools. So this is the overview page. It kind of has a lot in it, but each page after this goes a bit more kind of piece by piece. Actually, this one's also pretty big overview stuff. Don't worry about this right now. I would say like where it talks about how to save it or how to create it. I mean, you can look at this and try this on your own if you want to. I'm going to show you how to do this on your domain in UMW domains, which is going to look different than what they do here. But the concepts are the same. The HTML structure, the code, that's going to be the same. It's just the interface is going to look different. So feel free to kind of skim this, but skip over it. Mainly, work your way through it basically step by step. right? So here you're starting to see some pretty advanced kind of things. But yeah, this again, some people like it. Some people find that it's a little bit too like abstract at first, and that's understandable. So let me show you what Codecademy looks like instead. I'll see if I can do this without logging in. So Codecademy, one thing I don't like about Codecademy is that they try really hard to upsell you. Like they try to get you to pay for the quizzes and pay for the stuff. You don't need to. I don't recommend it. But like as you see here, I mean, well, maybe if you want to, you can. I'm not going to stop you. But as you can see, like you can't even access this course without logging in. So I guess I should log in. I think I've already completed this course in here. Maybe not. Okay. So the thing with Codecademy that a lot of people do like is that you have to do, like it'll explain a concept here on the left where it says learn, and then it'll tell you to do something in the middle, and then you'll see the result on the right, and then it'll check your work. If you don't do it right, you can't proceed. So right now it says in the code editor, type your name in between the H1 and the H1. Okay, some name, let me change it to Zach Whalen, and then hit run. And there it is. Great. And now I can hit next. And it also has hints here. One of the things I don't like is that it's very tempting just to click on the hint. And a lot of times the hint on Codecademy will just tell you the answer. And so you're not really forced to learn it. And I find that that's a weakness of this approach. The other thing, what is this? Format code? Oh, okay. The other thing is that when you get to more advanced stuff, often there are multiple ways to do what it's asking. And if you don't do it exactly the way it tells you to do it, it won't let you proceed, even though the way that you've done it is perfectly fine. That's something that you get into, especially with CSS. But let's see what it looks like when you go to the next one. So next, great. So then it's still giving me the anatomy here. I guess there's nothing to do on this one, but read it. Okay, so now see there's a red dot here that's telling me that there's a problem, and it's also telling me I need to add a body to my web page using the body element. Then I need to add this code here. Let's see what happens if I don't. Let's see if I do something wrong here and try to run it. Nothing happened here on the right, but if I try to click next, is it going to let me through? It did let me through. Oh wait, it lost the connection. That's interesting. That's weird. It's like breaking the connection, and then it's getting so upset with me that it's disconnecting. I don't know, but it will prevent you from proceeding. It looks like it's really kind of freaking out here. I mean, I gave it invalid code, but like, I don't know, that shouldn't have broken the website. Well, I don't know what's happening here, but it will tell you this is wrong, and it'll force you to keep trying until you get it right. That's the basic pedagogy for Codecademy. So these are the two things you should look at. Take a look through W3 Schools, take a look through Codecademy. Both of these links are to the specific curricula in those respective platforms that you should look at. They offer quite a lot. I mean, both W3 Schools and Codecademy offer tutorials in their respective structures on all kinds of topics. But HTML, that's where you should start. So the Learn HTML from W3 Schools, the HTML tutorial from W3 Schools, Learn HTML from Codecademy. Yeah, I don't know what's happening to the interface here, but I guess I broke it. Try not to break it, I guess. But a lot of people really like Codecademy, and I think a couple of you did use it actually for the creative coding module, so that was good. Good to see. Okay, so I'm approaching the end here. I've covered everything I planned to cover. If anyone has any questions, I can try to answer them, but I'm getting ready to wrap up here. By the way, I have put content up for almost everything else that remains in this class. It should be accessible, and you should see due dates that are correct and instructions for everything. For tomorrow, the only thing I haven't unlocked tomorrow because I wanted to change out the example. Like I still have instructions and things related to the To Kill a Mockingbird example, but I'm hoping to switch that out for a different example. So once I get that done, I'll turn on that page. But if nothing, at the very least, I'll work through that tomorrow on the live stream at 11. But looking at today, so your two big tasks are to choose a module among those three. Go ahead and take a look at those on the DGST101.net. I've also introduced them to you just now on the stream. But if one of those sounds really exciting to you, then signify that by writing a blog post about it, like why you want to do it, what you think you might want to work on, and share that in the appropriate Discord channel. And then take a look at HTML with Codecademy and W3 Schools. I don't have a specific, like get as far as you can. I mean, they are both structured sort of differently, so it's hard to say like here's the one you should get to, I suppose, but certainly get as far as you can with each of these. And this is really strange how broken that is. It's like still getting broken. Okay, well, let me through. What's going on here? Okay, that's weird how it keeps doing that. Let's see if I can get through this. Like, it seems like it should tell me not to go ahead, but because that was wrong. I mean, the code I put there was definitely wrong. All right, well, anyway, that's Codecademy, I guess. All right, so again, today, choose a module, start learning some HTML. And I do have some more suggestions and explanations down here at the bottom as far as where you should go from here. Oh, yeah, I guess they used to call this the HTML5 tutorial, but now it's just called HTML. That makes sense. The numbering system in the versions of HTML is at the point where it's basically, like it used to go like version by version, like really precisely, but now it's HTML5, and HTML5 is basically like it. Basically, they're just going to keep updating HTML5. So that's makes sense. You just call that HTML. But I learned HTML with HTML 4.01, which sounds like it wasn't that long ago, but HTML 4.01, like in terms of version numbers, it's not that far like from HTML5, but HTML 4.01 I think came out in 1997, something like that. So it's been around for a while, and it's been supplanted by many other things between 4.01 and 5. There was the whole XHTML era, I guess. Anyway, it's a pretty interesting history, but I'm not going to go into it now. Okay, so I am going to wrap things up, though. So if you have any questions, I'll stick around for a minute. I mean, you always have the opportunity to ask questions, of course, through Discord. My office hours are also open. And if you see me with a green dot online on Discord, you're welcome to start up a chat. Or if you DM me, right, it's asynchronous. So if I see a message later, I can respond to it whenever I have time or whenever I get back to my computer, whatever it is. Okay, so covered a lot today. I hope that was helpful and maybe even interesting. If you, yeah, like I said, reach out if you have any questions or issues. I'll go ahead and, where's OBS? There we are. So thanks for watching today. Thanks for joining me on the stream. I saw several of you out there watching. I will be online most of the day probably, and I will be streaming again tomorrow at 11. So thanks for watching and have a great day.